Check this out.
Air. It's the invisible goodness that links our brain with full gain, so we think without a strain, and without it would probably go insane. And it goes through our blood veins and acts like a water main. The more we get, the more our plants grow. The more our cells grow, the more we grow. In wealth and health. And although our lives are stressful and pressurized with anxiety and control, and you're still working on relaxing your soul while running around the magnetic pole looking for your self-control, and although it's taking its toll, we still breathe. We breathe in, we breathe out. Since the day of our arrival, we've been...
Did you hear that young 12-year-old man, Solly Raphael from Coffs Harbour, earlier on tonight's program? Well, he won the National Slam Poetry Competition the other week with that poem. That was the winning poem. I asked him how he knew all that stuff, and he told me from my mum. Solly is homeschooled by his mum, Michelle, and it got me thinking, wow, how many other kids across the country are being schooled by a parent at home? David Roy is a lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle, and he is a member of the Board of Studies for Homeschooling. The Homeschooling Consultative Group. It's a mouthful. Hello.
Good evening, Christine.
Look, 30,000 kids, Roy, across the country, and growing by 12% a year.
Well, yes, we suspect there's about 30,000 children across Australia who are homeschooled. What we know, there's around 15,000 from the recent data that are actually registered, and we kind of suspect it's significantly higher than that, that a lot of people maybe don't always register their children.
David, where do you sit? Are you an advocate of homeschooling? Is it better than a better alternative rather to the school system?
I don't sit in one particular camp. I probably would argue I sit right in the middle of the fence. I used to actually be quite anti-homeschooling when I was a teacher. I was a teacher for 17 years. But the more I looked into it and got involved talking to the community, the strengths from it I started to recognise. And when I looked at the research behind it, then I started to see just how valid it could be. But it all depends on the situation. It all depends on the family. And it all depends on the child, because for some families it's brilliant, for others it would probably just not work. And there are some families I know where one of their children is homeschooled, but the other child goes to mainstream education because that's what works for the child.
Mm. Well, why would a parent choose to do this? What are the main reasons?
Well, there are certain key reasons that are given in some of the states when people go for their registration to allow themselves to homeschool. They're asked if they would be mind saying why. It's a voluntary response they give, and we find that there's about 25% of the families choose for philosophical reasons. That's because they maybe just believe home is the best place to learn. There's an additional about 9% who do it for religious reasons. So that's actually one of the smallest groupings we have. 22% homeschool because of special educational needs. And majority of those are because it's not being met in the mainstream. 21% of people won't give a reason. And then there's another about 22% of people which give lots of various reasons, such as the child was being bullied, mental health reasons, it suits the lifestyle of the household and the family better. But the biggest reason that people give is for special learning needs.
Right. So what curriculum do they receive from government?
They have to teach the curriculum of the state that they're registered in. So if you live in Victoria, you teach the Victorian curriculum. If you live in New South Wales, you teach the New South Wales curriculum. If you live in the ACT, then, well, I guess you could teach the New South Wales or the ACT curriculum. And again, those curriculums are based on the Australian curriculum, and there's lots of material out there available on the web for people to use. And I've seen some amazing family situations where the learning that's going on one-to-one between the teacher, the mother, and the child in the school, because every homeschooled school, when it's registered and accepted, becomes technically a school in its own right.
That's just so interesting. What about financial support given to homeschoolers?
There's none. And this is one of the questions that actually came up in the recent parliamentary inquiry that I was involved in, is when children are homeschooled, the funding that the government, both state and federal, give towards every child in Australia, which on average can work out around $14,000 to $15,000 a year is spent, absolutely none of that goes to the child who's homeschooled. On top of the fact that legally, if the child is being homeschooled, there must be someone, the parent, there must be a parent who's at home homeschooling. So that parent can't work. So not only do a family, say if there's two adults in the household, one of those adults can't technically work, so the family can only ever have one income, plus they get absolutely no financial assistance in homeschooling.
And what about the child with special needs? That can't be easy.
Well, no. For some children, certain states, through their Centrelink processes, do have small sums of money available for children who are termed to be isolated from the community for whatever reason. But no, you're absolutely correct. For special needs, it's incredibly difficult, and NDIS money, which is fantastic, cannot be technically used for education, because It's meant to be used for the child to actually be in part of the community, not to educate them, because that's a different fund, and no one is really talking about that politically.
Are many of the mothers qualified teachers?
Yeah, lots. This is the other interesting statistic that's beginning to come out from some of the researchers across Australia who are actually looking into this. We're finding that a significantly higher proportion of families have a family member who has an education training. And many families are being homeschooled by a teacher who was a teacher. And it's very interesting, I think, and says something about maybe some of the challenges our mainstream system has when the very people who are meant to teach in those systems think it's better for their own children not to go into those systems. And there are problems. There are some fantastic schools out there, and you tend to find great schools are run by great principals, but there's also some other ones that are not fantastic, and that's one of the reasons that probably many families are taking education into their own hands. And in Australia, we at least have the democracy to legally do so, because some countries don't allow it to happen.
You mentioned before that you were involved in the recent New South Wales inquiry into homeschooling.
No, it was into the education of children with special needs, not into homeschooling. Yeah.
Right. So is it mostly a choice to homeschooling then, or do many of the homeschooled children have no choice? Like, for instance, they're not accepted into the mainstream school system?
Well, for the majority of children who get homeschooled, there is a family choice. But we're finding that for multiple numbers of children who are homeschooled for special educational needs, that they homeschool because they have nowhere else to go. Because one of the factors that came out of the inquiry was when families go to their local school to enroll their child with a disability, the school puts up barriers to that. Many schools do, not all do, and they're suggested to go to other schools or to a school 10 kilometres down the road, and that becomes a honeypot, as it were, for children with disability. They're being denied enrolment, or they're not being provided with the resources that they claim to be, because maybe when the money goes into school to support disability, the principal looks at it and kind of goes, well, I've got mould in the demountable, I'll get that cleaned first for all the kids. And the families are maybe finding that their children are being assaulted, either by children or sometimes in circumstances there's allegations of staff doing such, and other mistreatment or discrimination, or being denied access to the curriculum, being put into a segregated unit and not being taught. And the parents are going, well, my child has a disability, but that doesn't mean they can't learn, because all children can learn, and too often are now having no other choice but to homeschool, and homeschooling should be a choice.
We're talking homeschooling with David Roy here on ABC Radio. So what does that say about our education system?
Well, it says that our education system is a reflection of our wider society. I find it very saddening when I look in Australia, I look around the world, and I see that any group that is not the majority will often get treated with discrimination, whether it is women in positions of authority, whether it's with race, ethnicity, whether it's LGBTI individuals, children with a disability. And disability is one of the largest minority groups, and it's the one that's probably talked the least about in many situations of disadvantage and inequality. I think all children are just children. We should stop putting labels on them and say, that child's got a learning need, whether it's they need reading recovery or because they have visual impairment or because they have dyspraxia or because they have autism, and just say, that's their learning need, let's support it. And then if families want to homeschool because they feel that they could do a better job, then that's their choice. But it should be a choice. It should not be because there's no other option, because basically schools, whether they're public or independent or Catholic, are in breach of the law, which is what they are if they deny enrolment.
I think that many people would have imagined that it was a choice on ideological beliefs, like, not wanting their child to be institutionalized.
Yeah. We do have that statistic that from New South Wales, at least, who get these statistics, not all the states do, that close to 26% people say it's philosophical, whatever that means. Again, it's a very vague term. But when you have other and the nil and the special needs all collectively coming to around 66% of the choice of people, and religion only being 9%, and bullying, specifically just bullying, is only 1%, then you've got to say, look, there's other issues going on there in our system, and we want it to be equitable for all. Because I guess that's my aim, of both of when I was a teacher for 17 years, now as an academic, and also as a parent and myself, is we just want our Australian kids to have the best opportunity so that we can really show what a great multicultural country can do in leading the rest of the world. Particularly as we're now on the United Nations Human Rights Board.
Yes. I was also wondering about homeschoolers taking exams or tests. Does that kind of preparation happen?
Well, yeah, they have the opportunity. If a homeschool family wishes their child to sit in that plan, they can. It's not compulsory. In fact, I think more and more would like to see that happen, because it would allow us to see exactly what the academic achievement of kids who homeschool is. But again, that would have to be done on maybe a centre, the same way that, say, a distance university course allows, sends their students off to a community hall where there's a group of people sitting it. For the Year 12 examinations, if there is an element of classwork that is part of the mark, as there is in, say, Victoria and in Queensland and New South Wales, then the homeschool child must actually undertake classes in a registered institution like a TAFE or a high school, and that opportunity isn't there, but they can sit the HSC, just not get the final certificate ATAR, and then choose alternative pathways to go to university. And many children are now more and more being homeschooled from around about, from primary 1 all the way through to Year 12. But again, the large leap in numbers who start to register for homeschooling happens around Year 3 in the primary school, and that might be because there's been 2 years of experience of school, and it's, for whatever reason, it's not working.
So, is there any research on how many homeschool children go into tertiary education?
There's been some research, not really that specifically in Australia, and more so in America and in parts of Europe. But what the data tends to tell us is there doesn't seem to be any significant difference between the results of children who homeschool or children who go to mainstream school. It's not that homeschool children do fantastically better, as some would like to think. You get kids who don't do that well because kids are just kids. They're all going to be the same. That bell curve works for everyone. But yeah, we have homeschool children who go on to be doctors, and we have homeschool children who go on to be unable to find work. So it's no different. Yeah.
And parents are supposed to register their children to be homeschooled, but it's thought that more than 50% don't.
Well, we don't know.
Okay.
There's only supposition, kind of guesswork from when you hear people talking on social media groups, etc. But we do know that more parents are beginning to register. In some of the states, there's a slight pushback against that. Victoria, which had quite simple registration rules, have made theirs much more specific, with more detail, and obviously for many homeschoolers, particularly for ideological reasons, are kind of going, we don't want to be told how we're doing things. I come from maybe maybe it's my background and says more about me. I come from the perspective that registration is a good thing. Firstly, you're keeping the law. I think if we have laws, we should actually abide by them, and that includes politicians should maybe keep by them. But more so than that, I think when someone is registered as a homeschooler, you get someone visiting you. It's a legal requirement, basically to make sure you are homeschooling and not either putting your kid out to work on the farm, or that your child, because there have been stories both in schools and also homeschooling where it's not always been the case. But more importantly, as a parent, you love your child and you want them to learn. The person who comes out, the approved person, individual, who looks at your home, looks at your curriculum and your resources, you're able to get reassurance that you're doing the right thing. They're now doing this more with public schools, like they did with the Independent and Catholic, where they're now inspecting to make sure that actually they are delivering the curriculum. I don't see why homeschoolers should be given special treatment. I think I would like that reassurance to say, I'm doing the right thing.
David Roy, thank you so much for your time this evening.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you anytime.
Thank you.